Good morning, everybody. Today, for It's Just Human Beings, I thought it would be fun to talk about the role of the soul, the role of purpose, how we define or how we decide what our journey is going to be. I'm currently reading a book called In Search of Character. Can't remember the author's name. I'll have to get back to you on that. But he basically is trying to convince the readers that there really aren't any external circumstances such as our parents or things of that nature that actually determine what our journey is. He believes that our souls actually decided before we kind of came into the three-dimensional realm of relativity what it wanted to experience. And so it chose the people and the circumstances that would allow us to do that. So I'm just wondering, what do you think determines what our soul's purpose is? What's interesting about this book is he said there's a particularly large amount of pressure put on mothers because, most theories about kind of human growth and development are based on the fact that, our mothers were either great or were awful. And if our mothers were great, we turned out amazing. If our mothers were awful, we turned out to be these shitty, fucked up human beings. But he gives lots of case studies of lots of famous people throughout history. And he found that some who had really awesome mothers still were destined to greatness. And those who had great mothers were still destined for greatness. And whether that greatness and legacy came in the form of doing something that really contributed to society or was detrimental to society, either way, they were very noteworthy people. So his argument is, it's a fallacy to believe that your parents determined who you are. And he gave this example of identical twins who were separated at birth. And both of them were extreme neat freaks, like would clean to the point where like their hands would be sore and rubbed raw. And they asked one of the twins when they were an adult, they said, well, what made you this way? He said, well, obviously it was my mother. She was an extreme neat freak like me. And so as a result, I did the same thing. Well, they asked his identical brother the exact same question. And he was like, well, it was my mother, of course. She was such a disgustingly dirty person that I wanted to do everything in my power to keep from turning into her. So here you had identical twins who turned out that had very similar characteristics, but had very different upbringings. So if that's the case, is it really true that our parents determine it? And of course, I'm minimizing the theory. Obviously, he goes into much greater detail, but I really think this idea that our souls choose circumstances before we get here is a very empowering thing for humans, because I think a lot of us have no idea that we can consciously create. And so if we know we've chosen our parents as the vessels through which we wanted to be brought into this world, and there are certain circumstances that they'll be able to bring us that will carve out our destiny and our purpose, it's a beautiful thing. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very, very slippery slope, because this could very easily turn into kind of a blaming the victim type situation where if, someone is dealing with injustice or things of that nature, it must be because they wanted it. And that blaming the victim can be a very difficult thing, because then as humans, it frees us from feeling like we have any responsibility towards other humans. So while I certainly am about wanting us to understand how empowered we are and helping to consciously create our circumstances, I also think that it's very important as a species that we understand the power of our collective conscious and how we should feel love and empathy for all human beings. And if we see a certain situation that we feel is inhumane, we should want to do something about it. But I was just curious, what people would think about, what determines our destiny? You know what I'm saying? Is it our parents? Or do you think it's quite possible that our souls determine what we want to experience here on Earth, and we help facilitate the circumstances that will allow us to experience that to its fullest? Just something to think about.